One of the big stories that has come out of 2025 and leading into 2026 is how the gaming industry is changing its ways when it comes to what is even being considered a premium game these days. Before, a premium game meant something that was full of expensive cinematics that took years to make, with millions dumped into the most cutting-edge graphics, with the most prolific actors of their times voicing some characters so companies can put them in trailers to entice you to buy them, and they were usually, at least back in the day, feature complete. Now, instead, what has happened is the opposite. The games that are being made for less are not only resonating more with players, but they are costing less to buy too. And from what I can gather already, the sentiment that AAA is dying as AA and indie rise has never been more apparent than it is right now. So I want to talk about Diablo 4 and No Rest for the Wicked, and how these executives are trying to defend their lies of overpromising and constantly under-delivering. Because all of this and more is coming together to create what I can only call a catastrophic freefall of where we're going, and we're already seeing creatives fight in broad daylight with clashing ideologies too. So like I said, let's start with Diablo No Rest for the Wicked. You already know what Diablo is. It's an action RPG series that's been going on for years. No Rest for the Wicked is a new action RPG that's been in early access for quite a while for Moon Studios. That's the makers of Ori and the Blind Forest. Wicked looks to combine the build crafting and expansive features of your Diablos and your Path of Exiles with the combat style of your Dark Souls-like games if you want to as well. Like I said, there still isn't a full 1.0 release for Wicked yet, but according to user reviews and more, people really like the game, but this is where our story begins. So Thomas Mahler, who runs Moon Studios, recently posted this. As you can see, he called out streamers to try No Rest for the Wicked, and then took a jab at Diablo and Path of Exile, claiming that his game was more hardcore than those other ones. I really didn't read too much into this myself. I mean, games comparing themselves to other games during sales seasons or something is really nothing new. Even products like Coke or Pepsi have taken jabs at each other in the past, so like I said, nothing really new at first. Except then Mike Ybarra, who used to run Activision Blizzard for a few years, he helped with games like Call of Duty or Diablo 4 and Diablo Immortal even, decided to respond to Thomas Mahler and said this: "Putting down other games for your own game's sake doesn't really work. Let your game stand on its own 2 feet. I haven't played in a while, excited to fire it up and check out the progress." So what we have here is a guy from the executive side who's used to pushing expensive games that are full of microtransactions and more, trying to tell another guy who's making a much smaller game that he shouldn't take jabs at games that he has worked on himself. Well, how did Thomas Mahler respond to Mike Ybarra over this? Let's read as it says here. "Mike, real talk, you were put in charge of Diablo and you didn't treat it with the respect it deserved. Diablo used to mean something. Diablo 2 was an utter masterpiece and showed the whole world what Western developers could do. You okay turning Diablo into a microtransaction slot machine where people can buy horse armor for $65. So should we gamers thank you for that, or is a little honest critique deserved here? It's time that executives stop patting themselves on the back after ruining beloved franchises and accept some personal responsibility. And after it was all said and done, you then came out with this gem, so sit back and let others show you how it's done." Thomas then shared this article headline, which shows Mike Ybarra admitting that he had no idea where to take Diablo 4 at all when he was working on it. But Thomas is right. Mike was instrumental in ruining Diablo 4's reputation. That cannot be disputed, and Activision Blizzard in general really too. Diablo 4, in my opinion, was one of the biggest gaming disappointments in modern gaming. It was a game that was so unbelievably hyped up with false promises, then launched as a fully priced AAA video game that also had a massive microtransaction store for cosmetics day one. And these cosmetics were not cheap either, with barely anything at launch costing anywhere near, let's be real, affordable. Diablo, if you ask me, has been ruined since Diablo 3 even. We all remember the real money auction house that game had too, which was so notorious and poorly implemented that players who actually were able to obtain the best gear in Diablo 3 with the terrible drop rates opted to instead sell these pieces for like insane real money prices, then to just use them themselves in the game that they were playing. It just completely ruined Diablo 3's entire economy and player experience. It turned a once amazing action RPG essentially into a real money auction house that also, I guess, happened to have action RPG gameplay combat at times too. Like a reminder, okay? Diablo 3 did this well over 10 years ago and then some, and since then Blizzard has learned absolutely nothing from their failures, but instead masking their inadequacies by just finding new ways to force players to pay more money for things that should just be obtainable in the game to begin with. And Thomas isn't wrong in his accusations against what Mike Ybarra and his team did to the loyal Blizzard fanbase. price. As seen here in 2024, that $65 horse armor bundle is absolutely real. At the time when Blizzard implemented this $65, horse bundle, Diablo 4 itself was around $42 to buy, meaning that the backlash was nuclear because Blizzard genuinely was believing that a digital horse armor bundle was worth more than the entire game it was meant to be used in. This sort of microtransaction hellscape is a big reason why I walked away from Diablo 4 and never looked back after release. Not only was its open world rather pointless, its story kind of whatever, and its many systems just not really worth investing in at the time, but the game continued to ruin its reputation with fans and cause many people to just walk away in disgust after playing and paying Blizzard for what was promised to be the big return for Diablo faithfuls. Diablo 4 has since lost most of its player base and has been unable to bring back the majority of the people who bought the game in the first place. As seen here recently from Google's own trends, we can see just in 2025 alone, from September to December 2025, Diablo's interest has pretty much dwindled. It only shot up a little bit, I guess, to fall again when the newest expansion got announced, but even that has its own problems too. During the latest expansion announcement called Lord of Hatred, Blizzard confirmed the Paladin class was coming back finally. You could actually play the Paladin right now, but like always with Blizzard, there was a catch. The Paladin is coming with the newest expansion in 2026, but as seen here, you have to pre-order the expansion, which retails for $40 American or $50 Canadian, and then, and only then, do you gain access to the Paladin class. This is just another way that Blizzard has found a way to really monetize their game and force players into buying their content, because they are quite literally dangling a class that people have wanted for years in front of them. They just gotta open their wallets like usual first. And none of it sits well with me. I hate the idea of essentially taking content that is clearly ready to go and feature complete, and then instead using it as like breadcrumbs to entice people to pre-order your latest content instead. It just feels scummy, and honestly pay to win even. But like I said, this is how AAA works these days. They don't care about value really. If you want the entire Diablo 4 experience, it's gonna cost you way more than $80 these days. But this is the difference between what AAA and AA indies are doing, because you could buy all of No Rest for the Wicked for the price of like a single skin and then some in Diablo 4. This latest Diablo expansion is as expensive as buying the entirety of Arc Raiders right now as we speak. And yet Arc Raiders, at least for now as far as I know, will never have any paid expansions added to the game experience. There won't be any, pay us the entire price of the game again for like some new gun or whatever in Arc Raiders. Yet AAA has normalized these things, and it's horrific to say the least because it's just predatory and they know this and they still continue to do it anyways. Mike Ybarra would clap back at Thomas Mahler over his comments that Mike and his team at Activision when he worked there did completely ruin Diablo 4 and turn a promising sequel into a literal cash casino. Here's what Mike would say to Thomas after Thomas said Mike ruined Diablo 4 as it reads: "You can critique other games all you want, but running around putting down Diablo and Path of Exile begging people to play your game is stupid, and that is my point. You know it's stupid as well. I get you're desperate at this point, but I'd focus on your game and not Diablo 4 and Path of Exile." Oh boy, so Mike is now claiming that Thomas is desperate with No Rest for the Wicked and believes that the game will not do well enough to keep Moon Studios going. But Thomas would then clap back at Mike for ruining AAA games and being embarrassed by smaller indie titles like Path of Exile, which has, let's be honest, Path of Exile has completely ate Diablo's lunch and then some with way less resources and a much smaller team too. But here's what Thomas would say. It's a lot, but it's important here, so let me read it for you guys. "If Blizzard would have done their jobs right, it shouldn't have been possible for a tiny Australian studio to snatch the ARPG crown away from them, but they sure did. And why? Because Chris Wilson is a good dude, similar to David Brevik. He understood the mission and got the job done. Meanwhile, who are the current visionaries at Blizzard, and what do they have to show for themselves? And no, I don't know that a developer pointing out that squeezing gamers with nasty microtransaction tricks is stupid. How in the world are you justifying that there's a $65 horse skin in Diablo? You were in charge when Blizzard made Diablo Immortal and Diablo 4. You are responsible, and both have done irreparable damage to the Diablo franchise we used to know and love. I'm guessing that's why you got booted and are now the head of some gambling company, Mike, so please don't lecture me on games. I probably forgot more about game design than you will ever know." First off, Thomas is going a little nuclear here, but let's be real, guys. Did anything he say there, is any of that just not true? Like, let's be real. Mike Ybarra is now the head of a gambling company, go figure, but Mahler is right. Mike did get forced out of Activision Blizzard a few years ago because he did effectively ruin the overall reputation of Diablo and Blizzard even more than it already was, which is kind of impressive actually. I mean, Diablo 4's reputation right now, let's be honest, that's in the dirt. You can't beat that dead horse any more than it's already been beaten, you know what I mean? The game's like a casino still to this day. You have skins still costing you more than entire indie games and then some. But Thomas Mahler is right here. How could Blizzard with their billions of dollars and hordes of developers get outdone by a much smaller studio that's in New Zealand, not Australia, but close enough in the world, I guess? But still, that smaller team that made Path of Exile, and they did completely cook Diablo 4 the way that they did. Like, that doesn't just happen, not to mention that Path of Exile 2 and the first game are free to play. Like, you don't need to buy any of the bundles or the microtransactions to even play Path of Exile 2. I know that Path of Exile 2 probably sounds too good to be true, like how is a game that is bigger and like better than Diablo 4 somehow free to play, but it is. You can experience the entire story and endgame of Path of Exile 2 and pay literally nothing at all. Besides cosmetics, which are optional, obviously, the only, I guess, pay-to-win aspect of Path of Exile 2, from what I understand anyways, is that you will have to eventually buy stash tabs, which are like storage expansions to your character if you get serious about like trading and keeping all the loot that you have, all the loot drops. But stash tabs, from what I understand, as seen here, vary in prices, but you don't need these to actually play the game or finish the story or anything like that. These stash tabs are really only for players who pretty much want to turn Path of Exile 2 into like their main game, you know what I mean? Like that's their whole hobby now. So if you want to fully immerse yourself in it in like every way you possibly can and do like full player trading and all that stuff, then yes, you will need those tabs, I guess. But again, for the casual player, that's not needed, and that's the point. Any DLC added to Path of Exile is also completely free, including future expansions. These expansions in Path of Exile 2, they're called leagues. They're like the free content updates. And no, like I said, you don't have to buy them at all, okay? They are free as well, and always will be, as of now anyways, as this video being made, I guess. But in terms of price differences, you can't really compare Path of Exile 2 to Diablo 4. It's just not even remotely in the same ballpark. You can never beat free, and Diablo is essentially nickel and diming you constantly with new cosmetics, forcing you to pay if you want to play like a single class early like the Paladin, or even entire expansions that cost about the same as Arc Raiders, and don't even get me started on those crossover skins like with Berserk. Those were insanely expensive too in Diablo 4. So if you want to experience Diablo 4 in its entirety, yes, it will set you back, and every season you need to pay for the battle pass or get left behind, I guess. And this is what Thomas Mahler is criticizing Mike Ybarra for pretty much, that Mike and his influence on Diablo was cataclysmic to the reception and longevity of one of Blizzard's oldest and most beloved franchises. Like Thomas said, Diablo Immortal, that's the free-to-play game, but was also insanely expensive. Like if you actually wanted to do anything good in that game, you had to pay up. That was something that Mike Ybarra and his team, when he worked there, they dreamed up in the first place. Mike's influence was nothing short of awful on everything that he touches. That really can't be denied based on what's being shown, like the guy also was instrumental in ensuring that Call of Duty was as predatory as possible too. Mike is the exact type of executive the gaming industry honestly needs less of, because in Mike's eyes, you're all just kind of pay pigs who simply exist to just make his wallet bigger and his investors. And he clearly, frankly, cares little to nothing at all about the user experience, since he did completely ruin Diablo and made that fan base normalize the concept of no longer accepting not only fully priced AAA games, but releasing them full of microtransactions day one and battle passes, horse armor DLC, like it's Oblivion all over again. And then stupid nonsense, like again, pay gating new classes, all of this and more. While the competition does what Diablo 4 does for either way cheaper or literally free, it's not really rocket science why so many like myself have walked away from Diablo 4 the way that we did. Mike Ybarra would respond to Thomas ringing him out, and he would say this: "I'm definitely not a designer, you can critique me all you want. Game directors should always make decisions on games, that's not my point. I'm not here to point fingers, cry, and whine. I don't have to work anymore. You do. Just like Xbox's experience in working with you on Ori, all your future partners read this and understand what they are getting involved with. Good luck. I do really wish you and the team the best. You need to chill and focus on your team and your game. I hope it's successful." Ah yes, Mike, the slight jab there that you don't need to work anymore because you finessed and ruined entire gaming franchises by turning them into online casinos to just fill you and your investors' pockets because you couldn't care less about the user experience. This is not the win you think it is. Sure, you have money, I guess, But you have a terrible reputation when all things are said and done. You are quite literally running a casino website right now. That's the most my haters were right all along job pivot I've seen in a while. Like, this is the guy who wants you to be okay with paying more for less, but when he's hit with real logic and frustration, he factory resets to typical neutral executive talk instead. But Thomas Mahler would respond again to Mike, and he would say this: Mike, we're independent. We're not reliant on any publisher. I know that's hard to grasp for people who never worked at private companies and have only experienced the corporate world, but it's nice not having to say yes to stuff you should say no to. All our partners know me, Moon, and what we stand for. Not sure why you needed to tell me that you don't have to work anymore, but that I do. I work because I love my job. Because we want to make amazing games for players, not because someone is forcing me to. And I don't know if pointing out that you got a golden handshake after getting fired for your tenure at Blizzard makes you look particularly great either. Anyways, no hard feelings, yada yada yada. I mean, look, okay, he's right. Mike is your typical AAA executive, okay? He overpromises, he underdelivers, he heavily monetizes everything, causing it all to crash down, and then he will leave the company that you ruined at the expense of goodwill and other jobs, I guess. I mean you as in Mike here, and futures, because Mike signed like a contract that will leave him with like a golden parachute no matter what happens anyways. This is literally why AAA games suck so bad these days, guys, because people are like this pretty much, okay? They're running these companies and genuinely don't care about the games that they are tasked with improving. Why do you think that Diablo 4 or Call of Duty have been so bad for so long? Because the user experience doesn't matter to these people. The only thing that does is the bottom line. The wallet's refilling. The money has to overflow. Ironically, what Mike doesn't seem to realize is that by giving players what they would have wanted and respecting them in the first place, Blizzard and Activision would actually have made more money that way too. Because obviously a healthy game means more revenue, whereas the way Mike Ybarra and people like him are used to doing things, it's instead, let's overhype something, get people to buy in early, overpromise on everything, completely underdeliver in every aspect, and then take that massive surge of like short-term monetary gain and then just do that again and again and again. But what I do want you to notice, however, is that nowhere in what Thomas Mahler said to Mike Ybarra did Mike ever really refute or provide any like evidence or opinion that could actually discredit what Thomas felt people like Mike were doing to AAA video games as a whole in the first place. Mike couldn't combat anything he said. He couldn't say, no, we do not make games better for players, because he knows that that's not what he does. Mike knows in his heart that what he's doing is disingenuous to the paying customers of these franchises that he didn't even help conceive of in the first place. He was only brought to Activision Blizzard for the few years that he worked there for a very simple reason: monetization. I mean, let's even go look at Mike's LinkedIn, because this proves exactly what I'm saying. His longest job in AAA gaming was being a partner studio manager to corporate vice president at Microsoft for almost 20 years. Mike worked to actualize publishing in Xbox games, and at one point is seen there when he was corporate vice president of program management. His job was to create products that would engage and continue to gain fans' trust. Not even my words. That's his own, in his own profile. He wrote that himself. He then worked as seen here at Blizzard from November 2019 to May 2024, where he was executive vice president and eventually president of Blizzard Entertainment. And all Mike did during that time was insanely over-monetize everything that he could get his hands on, fill these AAA games with predatory practices, and ruin everything pretty much. Like, let's be real, he did that. He then says that he left, but he probably likely got forced out, as Thomas Mahler says, and Thomas might actually know things from the inside, which wouldn't really surprise me. I mean, Thomas literally said he got fired. He probably knows that. And now Mike, like I said, runs Prize Picks, a literal gambling company, like I said before now. This guy is frankly everything that was wrong with AAA gaming to a T, like actual supervillain portfolio on display. A user would respond to Thomas Mahler during all of this saying that it was better when developers were competitive instead of being fake nice all of the time, but Thomas would then reply, this toxic positivity stuff is for the birds. If you make a bad game, you should feel bad about it, and there shouldn't be a bunch of people that congratulate you for an awful job well done. You ask gamers to spend 60, 70 bucks on a game, make sure they get something for it. Again, I mean, he's right. I mean, it's a big reason why it's hard to justify buying most Western games these days at the full price. But in the case of Activision Blizzard, nothing they've made in years, in my opinion, has been worth the money that you've spent on it. If they're not busy trying to push out a new Call of Duty every single year, they're just trying to monetize whatever fans they have left to make as much money as possible before more people leave. Again, they did try to release back-to-back sequels like Black Ops 6 and 7, and I don't need to tell you how poorly that went for them, because you all know that already. But the frustrating part is that what Activision Blizzard has access to, Diablo, World of Warcraft, StarCraft, the Call of Duty games, etc., these are all franchises that used to be amazing. They had real creative, and how would I put this? I guess real cachet, if that makes sense, right? Like when a new Blizzard game got announced back in the day, it was was earth-shattering. Like, whoa dude, they're making a new Diablo game. Now the once rock-solid, amazing, almost borderline mythic reputation that Blizzard had back in the day is now almost always met with trepidation, cynicism, and a general belief that sure, what they're showing may look good at first, but how will they screw me over this time like they always do in the past, right? It's why these days terms like value have felt more like a dirty word when describing your game than anything else. If a company feels the need to say that this feature or that provides value, it almost certainly does anything but that. It also leads to what I call a content drought. A game pushing live service elements always opts to rather give you said content in drip feeding ways instead of dropping it all on you at once like they used to. This has ruined games like Destiny or Diablo aplenty, yet AAA still believes this is better, but only because it keeps these games longer in the public conscience, so to speak. Give them just a bit of story, lead them on just a bit more with some daily quests, let them get hungry and keep them starved so that every little bit of a crumb you actually give them that they consume, they will want more and more. Why do you think Blizzard didn't release the Paladin for Diablo 4 as a thank you to fans instead? Why do that? Make them pay for it instead. Feed them just enough for the expansion, which will no doubt have its own battle pass and more, and monetization and bundles and God knows what else too. Maybe they can add a nice choker necklace that says I'm a pay pig to my big daddy Blizzard, so you can put that on your character in game because that's all you mean to Blizzard anyways these days. This is why Blizzard has had nothing short of disastrous launches time and time again. They lie with the live service model, which can retain players because it's always too expensive and offers way too little in small amounts. Then you have the technical debt at launch as studios cut corners to meet deadlines while also under-delivering to ensure that they can fix basic features in the future and then call it improvements when they should have been there day one, let's be honest. And this all leads to empty promises and a complete disconnect between the marketing hype generated by these video games and the actual game content you obtain when you pay the already inflated, totally not worth what you're paying for price. This is why indie games are having an uprising, why Arc Raiders to this day continues to have massive player counts, why Path of Exile is still curb stomping Diablo even. No Rest for the Wicked promises to be feature complete day one. I can't confirm that it will actually be that when it has its 1.0 release, but there's definitely the proof already that Wicked is nowhere near as predatory or piecemeal with content over that of Diablo 4. If Blizzard truly cared about their player base, they would be more transparent, they would have much clearer communication when it comes to the overall scope of their games and the content provided with which you would buy. They would build true meaningful trust if they actually prioritize polishing their games at release, instead of making sure that the only thing that works is the cash shop like they always do. And by doing all of this, these publishers can redefine the value of their franchises and products by earning real player loyalty back through experiences that are not only robust, but have fair pricing too. There is no reason to buy Diablo 4 when cheaper, better alternatives already exist. There is really no reason to buy Call of Duty every year when Arc Raiders or Battlefield or Fortnite or any other game is out here doing what they do anyways for cheaper and for better too. This is why the new age of games is going to be cheaper, less predatory hopefully, and more focused on what they can actually realistically deliver over what they can just overpromise you instead. I don't want to hear that your world is huge, your voice talent is stacked, or how big your battle pass is if your game doesn't work at launch, has bugs aplenty, and you're charging me more than your competition is. And frankly, I don't think Activision Blizzard has learned much of anything either way. Mike Ybarra made it his mission to normalize and ensure that everyone who plays those games would be conditioned to just accept the horrific pay-to-win practices and bloated bundle prices instead. And in a way, Mike Ybarra set out and successfully completed the task in which he was hired for. But you then have to wonder what Diablo 4, World of Warcraft, Call of Duty, and then some could be like if these gambling-centric ideologies were instead removed from these franchises like the cancerous tumors that they are. I don't think Diablo will ever become the game that it could be, because if it did, Blizzard would have to dial back on the greed, but that's all they seem to care about anyways these days. Until they can prove that they're not literal Legion of Doom supervillains twirling their mustaches and laughing maniacally as they ruin every franchise they own to make investors happy, this will just continue to happen. The industry might want to normalize more expensive games, but it doesn't mean that we have to submit to their demands either. Thomas Mahler, while at times pretty brash, he is still right at the end of the day. People are walking away from these types of games. They're not coming back, and companies, especially executives, need to have serious talks if the short-term gain of these tactics are truly worth the long game for them instead. I won't be playing games that are predatory like this. And I also hope that Mike Ybarra has some honest-to-God introspection on how his actions are not making an industry he claims to love any better when he pushes such terrible ideas time and time again. We all deserve better, and it's time we stand up to this nonsense. What do you think? Let me know. Subscribe if you want more content. Thank you for watching, guys, and take care of yourselves.